Hey folks, MasakoX here. It may not be April anymore, but this video got so much love and attention, we're definitely not going to be keeping you hanging for a whole year. Like with some of our other what ifs that were created in April, we shall cover it more and more, like we do with the Ginyu Good what if, how we're still doing that today, and continue our thought experiment well into the months and years that follow. Maybe more like months, but all of this is coming from Christian Ebling, where he asked what could happen had Gohan and Caulifla swapped roles, the latter becoming the firstborn daughter of Goku and Gohan, heading for Universe 6 instead. However, with Universe 6 not being known about in this world for a long time as of now, Gohan, his place in the story is going to have to wait, but Caulifla has certainly done enough to keep you all endeared. So what could happen with her being around in Universe 7? Goku would certainly be a better parent, and Chi-Chi? Oh, if you don't like her, you'll like this, so be sure to like this video while you're here. In the last part, we laid the foundations for Caulifla's introduction into the world of Dragon Ball. Thanks to celestial jimmying, Gohan and Caulifla's essences were switched around, with the biker gang gal landing in Chi-Chi's stomach and therefore becoming a half Saiyan instead of a full one. But that didn't mean that she'd be any less forceful or that she wouldn't resemble her original persona. She was just as much of a force here. Goku, though, loved this, and thanks to this better connection, which is sort of explored in the main timeline, the two of them got on splendidly, whereas Chi-Chi had to fight tooth and nail to get anywhere with her. When it came to Raditz and what he would do to try and throw the cat amongst the pigeons, he tried to make it out that, oh, he was kidnapping his own niece, but instead of being scared, the niece found the whole experience the greatest of thrills. In the end, Raditz couldn't go through with it, but when Piccolo tried to muscle his way in, Caulifla then had a plan to use these two baddies as part of a prank on her dad, which went disastrously wrong. Both Raditz and Piccolo felt terrible, and what was worse, Vegeta and Nappa had heard the whole thing, including the whole Dragon Ball plot point. So whilst Goku is sent off to the other world, our two villains have to step up in order to correct this lapse in their judgment. Like we mentioned in the last part, Raditz and Piccolo didn't feel good about this win at all. In a fit of desperation and pride in his new technique, Piccolo had hidden in a shrubbery to charge his attack, and it turned out not to be as special as he had first thought. After all, Raditz couldn't believe the mess he had gotten himself into. Tch, no going back now. Coming here was a waste of time. But then he looked to his niece, who was still inconsolable after having inadvertently orchestrated her father's demise. Raditz regained his composure and tended to his kin. Caulifla wasn't angry at Raditz for any of this. After all, she had been the one to plot this plan that backfired. Raditz made sure to comfort her as best he could. He may not have been the most adept with soothing infants, but dang it, this was family. The last example of said family he had left, and he was going to protect her no matter what. Caulifla felt safe, despite this sudden upheaval at such a tender age. As that was going on, Piccolo had to swallow his pride and make a very bold decision, something that he had never resorted to before now. Although he knew it was entirely possible, he had to contact Kami. It made him sick to think it, but he had no other alternative. Kami wasn't angry though he was deeply saddened by the Pickle's trickery. I cannot say I'm impressed with that, even for you. At least King Piccolo would have had the decency to show himself throughout, instead of lurking in an oversized bit of foliage. Yeah, you don't need to remind me. Now shut up and listen. I admit, I screwed up. Big time. Kami nodded telepathically. I am well aware, Piccolo, but I appreciate the fact that you contacted me. It must not have been easy for you to do so. I can sense that you have no ill intent with Goku's youngling. Is that so? Piccolo looked to Raditz and Caulifla, who were busy comforting one another. No, neither does the giant monkey man. Kami then suggested that the best thing to do now would be to fix this initial predicament, and that would be by gathering the Dragon Balls and getting Goku back as soon as possible. He had just been to the Otherworld, incidentally, with Goku to try and steer him onto his next mission. Piccolo was stunned to hear that in the Otherworld, you could still exist, and it was that intricate. And Kami then lambasted him for being ignorant of the shared knowledge that they had had. But that wasn't important right now. They need to go and get the Dragon Balls pronto, which is exactly what they try and do. Right after they try and figure out what it is that Caulifla can eat. Goku winds up in the other world after Kami steered him there, and heads off for King Kai to do his training. Not much else is different here, really. The real tonal shift happens down back on Earth, with the rest of the Dragon team, them scouring the planet, desperately trying to look for Goku's kid. Whilst they're doing so, Kami gets in touch with them all, and states that Caulifla is not in any danger, that Piccolo and Raditz are looking after her, and that they have no desire to hurt her. You know the Dragon team, they ain't gonna be buying it even if it was coming from Kami, coming from God. Bunch of non-believers. Krillin and Chi-Chi go off to find them, and they find them. Relatively easily, in fact. There's no game of cat and mouse here, since Raditz can't sense energy without the scouter, and Piccolo had no temptation to try and hide in the shadows like he did for his original plan back in the day. There is a moment of confrontation before Chi-Chi stomps over to Raditz and gives him a smack across the face before he can even try and apologise or explain. Caulifla flinches whilst holding onto her uncle's leg. How dare you! You killed my husband! And you have the nerve to try and steal my only child for your own schemes? Raditz tried to reason with Chi-Chi, but she was not in the mood to listen. Caulifla was watching all of this, but she wasn't sad anymore. There was another feeling going on. Resentment. Anger. Towards her own mother. She didn't get it. She didn't know the full story. Just when Raditz was about to get another wallop across the jaw, Caulifla stepped out and got in the way of Chi-Chi. Sweetie, what are you doing? Leave him alone, Mommy! He didn't do it! It was all me! Piccolo and Raditz were aghast. Wow, this girl's got some guts. For a 4-year-old? Chi-Chi didn't understand what she meant. But then Caulifla explained that she told them to, as part of a prank, do what they did. It got out of hand. She didn't mean for any of this to happen though, and she was very sorry. They promised to help fix it too by looking for the Dragon Balls to bring Goku back, and Kami confirms this from up top. And that is what they all agreed. Even Krillin was starting to look a little less aggressively toward the two villains. You know, this is starting to add up, Chi-Chi. It was an accident. Think about it. Caulifla wanted to go. Caulifla looked focused and nodded. I did kill her. It's Krillin, dear. But she didn't care, the youngling. She was willing to accept the blame. But Chi-Chi, nope. She didn't want to hear any of this. Despicable. You put her up to this, saying all of that. You do that to a little girl. I've had enough of this. Caulifla, you're coming with me. But when she went to grab her arm and drag her away from Raditz, the girl was not budging. She dug her heels in and gave an icy look toward her. No. Chi-Chi was horrified. This level of defiance. All the more reason to get her away from these two brutes. She tried again. Nothing doing. Caulifla was going nowhere. Chi-Chi kept pulling. Krillin trying to calm her down. But all this wound up with Chi-Chi then screaming at Caulifla to get moving. And then the girl kicked her in the shin. That shut her up. I'm not going! Caulifla screamed. I did this! I want to help fight against more Saiyans! You're not listening to me! Caulifla looked defiant, whilst Chi-Chi looked extremely hurt. And that kick? That hurt even more. She fell to the ground and winced in pain, letting go of Caulifla, who remained steadfast. Krillin tried to defuse the situation. Wait, what do you mean by more Saiyans? Tell me, Caulifla, what's going on? Caulifla then did the best she could, with Raditz's help, to tell them of the situation with Vegeta and Nappa's possible arrival and the need to train. Krillin believed this. This wasn't something that they would lie about. And also, Kami had never lied before, so why would he now? When all was said and done, a truce was called, and a compromise reached. Piccolo and Raditz vowed to train Caulifla and get her ready for the fight. Chi-Chi not in a position or inclination to argue any further. She needed a senzu for that one, and I'm not talking about her shin. Raditz agreed to take her back home to sleep and eat, but didn't invite himself to dinner. for fear of making the matter worse between mother and daughter. As they went about that, Krillin and Bulma would look for the Dragon Balls and have them ready for when Goku was completed with his training, which was told to them by Kami when things had simmered down. When all was said and done, Krillin and Chi-Chi headed back to Capture Corp to get the Dragon Radar, and Raditz and Piccolo set out to train with Caulifla, who was very receptive to the idea. In the months that followed, Caulifla's training became more and more intense, with the young girl very willing to follow instruction and hone her new power, and she did so very quickly. Going from her base power of 50 when she first met Raditz, after 6 months, she was already at 1,000. Really, Masako? How? Well, first off, it's an April Fool order if I can do that, and secondly, with her being willing to train and Raditz being there as well, it meant that gains were a little more forthcoming. Even for her Uncle Radish and Pickle too. They benefited as well, especially Raditz. Raditz felt so emboldened by this. He even chose to share with his niece his famous double Sunday technique. Now, I don't go giving this out to any space Tom, Dick or Harry. Use it well, kiddo. Caulifla nodded with gusto and tried her best to mimic it, but with her being little, it wasn't exactly easy. So she learns that instead of the Masenko. As for Piccolo, he was still mainly doing this to correct his error. Once Goku was back though, he would fight him again and get a proper worthy outcome. But even then, he had grown a little bit fond towards Caulifla. If things had turned out differently, she would have made a fine underling. Up above, Kami was watching whilst training the remainder of the human contingent of the Dragon Team. He felt good that Piccolo, despite his stubborn desire to take over the world, was willing to go along with this plan. And as for the Saiyan, well, he was certainly an anomaly. He was rather calculating, resourceful, and even slightly cowardly or passive when things went amiss. My, so many surprises as of late. Now what happens with Chi-Chi and Caulifla? Well, needless to say, things aren't all that great. Chi-Chi knew that this day would come, that Caulifla would become an angry, rebellious young woman. But not when she was 4. She wasn't prepared for this act of malice, but upon reflection, Chi-Chi realized that she had not listened to her. Not really. She was too swept up with Goku being offed, the Saiyan arriving, and everything else. She had forgotten to be a mother and be relieved that her child was safe and that Goku's passing would only be fleeting. He'd be back. Nothing bad had happened since too. Raditz had kept his word, and every single day, without fail, he would deliver Caulifla back safe and sound. Caulifla too was quick to forget the incident and told her mother everything that she had accomplished that day with gusto, and Chi-Chi listened. Not with the utmost pride, since she still didn't want her daughter to be a fighter, but at least she was happy. That mattered the most right now, to heal wounds, both emotionally and physically. When it came time for the Saiyans to arrive, the gang were more ready than they were in the original. Caulifla had gotten much stronger than when she had met her uncle for the first time. She looked fiercer, tougher, and more focused thanks to Piccolo's side of training, her having to tough it out sometimes on her own for long periods of time. Chi-Chi was warned of this ahead of time from Raditz, so as not to suddenly go looking for them all and kept in the loop constantly. She was ready not only to stop these evil Saiyans, but also see her father again. The wish had been made on the Dragon Balls just before the Saiyans got to Earth, and Goku was revived. But he still needed some time to get back to Earth, which wasn't previously calculated. This means that the Dragon Team have to fight Nappa and Vegeta without him. But at this time, they have Raditz on their side as well. At first, Vegeta reckoned that Raditz had turned himself into a sleeper agent, trying to assimilate himself into the local fold, and then later swindling them. Alright Raditz, you've done well to stall them. Now know your place, and come show them what you truly think of them. I already know my place, and that is Earth. Both Vegeta and Nappa were floored, but the bigger of the two just laughed it off. Would you look at that, Vegeta? Raditz grew a spine! Mind if I go ahead and shatter it for him? Vegeta obliged, and Nappa headed off into battle, fighting Raditz right there and then. He thought it would be a very short battle given their difference in power, but it wasn't. Thanks to his newfound confidence, Raditz hadn't only gotten stronger than before, he had managed to truly find his feet. Because of his equal potential to Kakarot, when he found his footing, Raditz was able to go toe-to-toe with Nappa, This fight was pretty equal, but Nappa wasn't upset about this. In fact, he was overjoyed to see this.
Man, I never thought I'd see the day that I could actually have a proper spar with ya. Shame you had to go ahead and betray us and all. You're saying brethren? Brethren? The only brethren I had died along with the planet. You two were nothing but my worst nightmare for years. And now this? Beating you? This is my dream. He slammed Nappa to the ground and began to wail on him for a moment before the big lug could regain the tide and resume the stalemate. Vegeta thought about intervening, but he found this to be rather entertaining. He wanted to see how far Raditz would go, whilst he could plant the Cybermen to deal with the rest of the trash. But even those turned out to be less effective than before. Caulifla was keen to fight them. Piccolo was able to tank them, and even the humans were a little more composed than before, thanks to the intel that Raditz had provided them about Cybermen, in case Nappa pulled any cheap tricks. So even though the odds weren't as in their favour as before, Vegeta was still not worried, and was keen to see how things panned out before he chose to do anything. Those Dragon Balls would be his with or without Nappa. He could take down anyone on this miserable dust bowl. Once the Cybermen had been felled, the rest of the gang rounded on Nappa and began to push back. Nappa was calling for Vegeta's help, but he kept ignoring him. Watching this, Caulifla didn't like what she saw. She thought Vegeta was a big wimp and not cool at all, unlike her Uncle Piccolo and Radish. They were very cool. Even this giant nappy was cooler than the vegetable, but that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now, with the Saiyans looking less assured than ever. If you like this idea where Raditz and Piccolo teamed up, check out the classic Raditz story here, where their teamwork led to the Radish becoming a good boy. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!